Hello and welcome back to JRG Guitars. Up next, another episode in our SG build from SoloMusicGear. So where we left you off last episode, we had glued that neck and body together. We'd pulled the clamps off right at the end of the episode and we saw that our neck joint looked good. So we were going to progress with sanding and staining and all the finish work that was yet to come, and that's what we're going to talk about here in this episode today. So we're going to do a lot of sanding. I mean, to say we do a lot of sanding is even an understatement. It seems like you can almost never sand a guitar enough. In this episode, there's going to be a lot of skipped footage and fast-forwarded footage, because if I played all of the sanding footage, we would be here for hours. So we're going to start and do some initial sanding on this guitar. We're going to start with a 120 grit, move ourselves up to a 220 and a 320, and then we're going to go ahead and apply some stain, and we're going to walk through that whole process. We go back and forth with staining and sanding. We put on some sealer coats, and then we sand some more, and we do some more sealer coats, and we sand some more. We do some grain filling, and then we get to a point where we put some poly on. So this is going to be an episode where that guitar body is hopefully going to come to life for us, and we're going to see all that great wood grain accent, and we're going to want to have a nice looking guitar. So when we start to put that hardware on there, it will really start to pop, because we know that we have done a lot of good work on the fretboard. We know it's going to feel good. We want it to look good. Then we're going to put it together and have it sound good there at the end. So thank you for checking back in here. If you enjoy this type of content, I'd urge you to hit that subscribe button, because these episodes are coming at you, and I'd love to bring it to you so you can see it to the end and see this guitar when it's finally completed. If video suits your liking, hit that like button. Don't forget to ring that bell. Do all that good stuff. So up next, here comes the episode. Some of this up. So as I said in the intro, there is a lot of sped up footage here, and that is the case. You're not going to see a lot of the back and forth between the different grits, but trust me, I started out with a 120 and then to a 220 up to a 320 grit before I applied any stain. And sometimes between those various grits, I would wet the wood down to raise the grain so that I could knock off those higher spots in the grain. It is a long process of sanding just to make sure that it looks as good as it can. For the most part, I tried to sand with the grain, although I did do a little bit of swirling here and there as I got up to the higher grits, and that seemed to prevent those scratches from being able to be seen. I was noticing some of that on my test pieces. Alright, so sanding done, and we're ready for some stain. I had done some stain tests. This is my first test where I had done some red, and I have some Kalamazoo mahogany. This is a really dark brown, and originally I was going to mix the cherry red with the brown to get that sort of what they call heritage cherry with the SG sort of classic color that we all see on a lot of those SGs. I think I like it better once I stained this dark brown, it's almost a black, into the grain, sanded it back. It left these really dark grain marks, and then I put some red on top of it. These are some samples where I then put some poly on top of it. This is what I really like, and then I had sanded it even too far, but I see in some of these areas here, it's exactly what I'm going for, where I have some of that darkness and the red. It's a little more red than I originally thought I would go for, but I really like it, and that's what I'm going to shoot for. So we're going to go down first with this Kalamazoo mahogany, and then the red on top of that after some sanding back. So that's where we're going to start. Okay, Kalamazoo mahogany. Don't fail me now. I decided I would start with only the back, so I'll go dark brown to red on the back only, just to make sure that it does what I want it to do, to mimic what I was getting on my sample pieces before I do the rest of the guitar. Filled in the edges of that control cavity so we won't see any light wood peeking through. Not worried about the inside of the control cavity, obviously. But there's the back. We're going to let it set up and cure. Alright, so I've let this set up now for a little while. Looking good. So we're going to sand this back with some 320, and there'll be some red over on top of that. Had to power sound it with 220 to get most of it off. Then I went back with 320, hand sanded it. It's left just a little bit on here. We've got our cherry red ready to rock. So as the cherry goes on, just like with the brown, the wood is very thirsty. It drinks up a lot of dye, but it goes on fairly evenly, gets on there nicely, and starts to really look good and do what I want it to do after I had those brown accents down there. It really starts to come to life. The actual color and the way the wood grain accent is going to look really starts to look how I envisioned it and how I wanted it to look, and I'm starting to really like how this finish is looking. Okay, so here it is. With the first coat done, doesn't look too bad. I kind of like the accents, the irregular accents of where the dark stayed right on the edges. I didn't quite sand it all the way. Gives it a nice feel, sort of highlights those edges. Dark brown going on first. So here goes the brown on the rest of the entire guitar. I'll start with the sides and do the top of the guitar onto the back of the neck and the headstock and such, and we'll get that all on there. Once again, the wood is very thirsty and drinks up a lot of the dye, but again, I get good penetration, goes on evenly, and I'll be able to sand this back once I get this on and set up. So here we are sanding the brown on the rest of the guitar, and we're just going to get it all back to where just the wood grain accent is there prior to putting on our next process of stain. So here we are, the brown is all sanded off on the rest of the guitar, and I'll apply the red, and once again, very thirsty, requiring a lot of dye, but going on evenly, looking good. And I think the process is really coming along nicely. So here we are with some steel wool. So the steel wool really made a huge difference here. That really gets that stain to sort of sit down and the scratches to sort of be more nominal, where it really just looks like a nice piece and you can't pick up any of those groove or sanding marks. So here you can see we went out into the spray booth to apply this sanding sealer. This is not a very inexpensive spray gun at all. I bought it at Harbor Freight for around $15. It's just some very basic sanding sealer that I pull into the dispensing cup and spray it on lightly. I do get some runs and drips, but they're able to sand off and scrape off fairly easily. Alright, so our initial coat of sanding sealer is on, and we can see it really retained the color that I wanted quite well. So this looks quite nice. Some sanding is required. Alright, so the next coat of spray is down. We get a low angle, we can see it really looks nice. It's got a bit of an orange peel feel in some areas. You can definitely see grain in others. Alright, let's do some sanding. So I am going to do some grain filling. So on some of the sample boards that I did, I would put down the dye and then I would put down some grain fill and it would just move the dye all over the place, and it was a big giant mess. So I've decided that I think I needed to have the sanding sealer on there to lock the dye in, and then I can put some grain fill on, and then I'll do another coat of sanding sealer to lock that in before I then put on my poly coat. So today will be the aqua coat. So it goes on a little bit white and dries clear. I've done some test samples and it does seem to work fairly well. So we're going to put this on, let it dry overnight, and sand it back thereafter. So after the filler goes on, I put a very light coat, but it does need to be sanded back. So I do a light sand just to let that filler penetrate down into the lower spots and sand off on the top. Steel wool time. The steel wool, once again, is a nice trick to help everything sort of sit down, lessens those deeper scratch marks, and sets it up for the next bit of finish on top of it. Once again, we're out in the spray booth and we're just going to put some sanding sealer on top of what we have sanded down with that grain filler just to lock that in, and that would have us prepped and ready for a poly to be put on top. Set up and ready to go. So I just use this Minwax wipe on poly. It's the clear gloss. So as I wiped on the poly, it leaves sort of some wipe marks. It picks up some little hairs and fuzz in there. But what I have found is that once that dries and I do a little sanding there, it knocks them right down. I can apply more poly. What I would do is I would apply numerous coats of poly and then eventually do a wet sanding to really knock all that stuff down before I could finally buff this thing up to a high shine. Okay, so here we go. Multiple coats of our poly on here, and we are now going to do a little wet sanding to try and get at some of the ridge lines and other little garbage that got penetrated and sealed into here. Try and clean all that up with a wet sand with some 1200 grit. Switch over to this side. We can really see from this camera angle the shine. So the shine is there. I'm just looking to get it a little more mirror-like. All right, well, there we have it, sort of leaving you on a cliffhanger. that guitar is ready to have a little bit of wet sanding and continue on with the finishing. But this was a long episode, bringing it from just having that neck glued to the body all the way up now to this stage in the finishing process. So I do appreciate you staying here this long into the video. If you have not already, please hit that like button while you're at it, hit the subscribe button, and ring that bell for notifications. More videos will be coming at you, and I'd love for you to be able to pick up each one as we release. If you have that bell hit, you'll get a notification. So thank you so much for staying in here with JRG Guitars this long into the video and this long into our video series. We will see you next time for the next SG Build episode.